Hey Rob, a druid triggers a trap and the floor opens beneath them, leading to a 100-foot fall. The druid can wildshape as a bonus action. Do they have time to wildshape into a bird before they hit the ground? This is a hotly contested question in my last game and we couldn't find a firm answer. You couldn't find a firm answer because the firm answer in D&D is we don't give a shit about coming up with minutiae for things that come up very often in people's games. Things like underwater combat or mounted combat or falling rules. The rules in the game, the rules in the book say fall damage is one of the most common hazards for an adventurer, and yet the rules on fall damage, it is that one paragraph, and that's pretty much it. It is very unclear. They brought out extra additional rules that they considered optional rules in Xanathar's guide that clarified things a touch. But rules as written, how to fall and when you fall and how fast you fall, it's all just like the DM will decide, I guess. And it leads to a lot of inconsistencies. And it's partly because, as they will continually say, the designers will always say, D&D is a storytelling mechanic, not a physics engine. And so they never account for mechanics to deal with acceleration or momentum or inertia or any of that stuff. So you can infer an argument based on whatever you want it to be from the rules and claim that it's rules as written. So for instance, a rule in Xanathar's guide says if you are falling a long way, then you instantly fall 500 feet, and then you stay just falling in the middle of the air until your next turn, and at the end of your next turn, you fall another 500 feet. And then at the end of the turn after that, you fall another 500 feet until your fall is halted. So if you retrospectively apply that to the base rules, rather than the optional Xanathar's rule, then you could infer that as soon as you start to fall, you instantly fall, which means that you do not have to account for speed at which you fall. You don't have to account for acceleration. We already know that they don't account for acceleration by the fact that you just take a flat d6 damage from every 10 feet fallen. It doesn't increase in damage the longer you've been falling. So if you step on a trapdoor, it opens, you could infer that you could argue with the rules that you just instantly hit the ground 100 feet down and that's it. You just take 100 foot of falling damage, which is 10d6 damage. You could also argue, using the rules, that if that is the case, that as soon as you fall, you instantly fall up to 500 feet and hit the ground, you could also argue that if that was what was intended, rules as intended, the Featherfall spell is completely useless, because Featherfall has a range of 60 feet, and its trigger is when somebody you see starts to fall, or when somebody you see falls, not starts to fall. When somebody you see falls. If they fall, and they instantly fall 100 feet, then by the time you can trigger your Featherfall spell, they're 100 feet down. So obviously any sane DM applying some of the reality, some of the realism, the verisimilitude, the physics of a real story that you're telling together, you must assume that there is a moment of acceleration from 0 velocity to some velocity during which you can take a reaction. So if you want to apply physics to it, you could argue that because just by the existence of the Featherfall spell, you must have more than just an instantaneous teleportation to the ground. But the rules do not specify when you fall, whether you fall at the start of your turn, end of your turn, immediately as soon as the trapdoor opens, etc. You could argue, I guess, using Xanathar's, that it says you instantly fall, and then on subsequent turns you fall at the end of your turn. So you could argue that you trigger the trapdoor by standing on it, but you don't fall until the end of your turn. But then you have the Wile E. Coyote thing of going, well, I'll just use the rest of my movement and the rest of my turn to just walk off of the trapdoor, and I won't fall unless I'm standing over the trapdoor at the end of my turn. So in the designer's attempts to deliberately keep the game from being too number crunchy, and to leave it open and to make a distinct effort of saying, it's not a physics engine, don't worry about that stuff. By doing so, they've actually made it more confusing and more difficult for the players who play the game to go, well, when am I meant to be able to trigger this thing? When can I do this? When can I not do this? So it's really down to you to decide. An argument against it that I can see is that a bonus action is not a reaction. There is something baked into the game, a mechanic baked into the game called a reaction that is about being able to react to things that happen, that you weren't expecting to happen. You can't Wildshape as a reaction, so you could argue, no, you can't Wildshape. You could, however, argue that because it was the Druid's turn, as they've stepped onto the platform, if they still have the rest of their turn to go, then they would be able to take a bonus action on that turn, so they should be able to take a bonus action to turn into a bird. If you argue that that is the case, then there's other rules taken into account. There's an optional rule in Xanathars that says if you have a flying speed and you fall for whatever reason, then you take damage still. You still hit the ground as if you are teleporting down and have no time to react, but you take less damage because you can like flap your wings to slow your fall, and the damage you take is reduced by your flying speed. So if you bonus action Wildshape into a bird with a 60-foot fly speed, then instead of taking 100 feet of fall damage, you would take 40 feet of fall damage, but you'd still take 4d6 fall damage. So unfortunately, the reason you couldn't come up with a firm answer in the rules is that there are no firm answers in the rules regarding fall damage. It's all nonsense, which is exactly why I have my own fall damage table, so that I can handle these things in my own homebrew games. So I have two different tables that I've got on the inside of my GM screen. One that says height by falling, so if somebody throws a pebble down a cliff and they want to know how high the cliff is, I can just look and go, okay, well the cliff is 60 meters or 200 feet, so you would hear the thing clatter after 3.5 seconds, because that's how long it would take a pebble to fall 200 feet. Likewise, on the table next to it, I've got fall damage. So if you're falling from 60 feet, you would take 21d3 damage by my table, because it accounts for acceleration and what have you. So by my table, I would allow you to use your bonus action to turn into a bird, because in order to fall 100 feet, that would take, it says on my table, 2.5 seconds. If it would take 2.5 seconds to fall 100 feet, then 2.5 seconds is almost half your entire turn. I feel like a bonus action should be less than half of your entire turn, because they're kind of intended to be shorter or faster actions, even though it doesn't specify how long a bonus action should be. The entire turn is 6 seconds, and you can fit in movement, action surge, whatever, hasted action, anything else you're doing, and a bonus action, and a free action, and a free object interaction or whatever. So if you can fit all that into 6 seconds, then your bonus action should be less than 3 seconds. If you've got 2.5 seconds to fall, I would allow anybody in my games to turn into to Wildshape into a bird, and then I would probably have them make a acrobatics check or an athletics check or something to pull up in time to not slam into the ground. And then if they did slam into the ground, I've got my own fall damage table for it. So make up your own rules and hope that they work for your table. If you've got a question for me or want some advice, or maybe you just want to hear me talk about D&D more, come join me on Twitch. It's free to follow me there, and it's a great way to support me too.